Welcome to Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that dares to bring the no-nonsense insight to those who have the courage to start, grow, and scale a business. Here is your host, entrepreneur, investor, and best-selling author, Susan Sly.
Well, hey, what is up, raw and real entrepreneurs, wherever you are in the world? I hope you're having an amazing day. And this amazing human I am about to share with all of you, I got so caught up in a conversation, I almost forgot we were doing a show. And I was like, oh, Susan, come on, hit the record button. Let me just say before I even share her bio with you that if you're wherever you are in the world right now, I know Nigeria is coming up in our listening audience. Whether you're in South Africa, whether you're in Cambodia, wherever it is, I just want you to know that what you're going to take away from today's episode is that you can create a business regardless of the area you live in. And that's what I want everyone to know. And don't forget, we love a good review here at Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, and we've had some great reviews. If you do go and give a review, and I read it on the air, you will get a $50 Amazon gift card from me to you with love. So do go give a great review. We would love to hear it. So my guest today is the owner of the Tarboro Brewing Company and Wine and Dining Inc. Say that fast 5 times. Oh my gosh. We were talking about the beverage industry before, and that it is a really interesting industry to break into. This incredible gal got her start in the world of food and wine after moving to New York City from her home state of North Carolina, which I've been to many times. And she grew up in the small town of Tarboro, and we share that in common, growing up in small towns, and graduated from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 1998 with a degree in journalism and mass communications. And so kids, a lot of kids listen to the show, just know that when you go adulting, sometimes your career is not based on what you got your degree in, friends. And she chose New York's Institute of Culinary Education to get her start there. And she began to learn about wine, which is probably differently than I've learned about wine, which inspired her to take a job at Bestsellers, the groundbreaking mid-priced wine store on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Her career took her to Assistant Cellar Master at the renowned World Trade Center restaurant Windows on the World. And she climbed the ranks. And then she said, you know what? I am going to go into business for myself. And so we're going to hear that story. But I want to welcome this amazing entrepreneur, incredible human, and author of Life After Windows, Inez Ribustello. Inez, thank you so much for being on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship.
Oh my, Susan, thank you so much. I think that's the nicest thing. That introduction is overwhelming. Thank you.
Oh, it is my pleasure. So first question I have for you is, were you a born entrepreneur, or did that path evolve for you?
Gosh, I don't think I was a born entrepreneur. I was a born worker. I loved to accomplish things. And I also loved to make money. Notice I didn't say save money because I'm a big spender. But yeah, I had a job since I was 12 years old. You know, at the beginning it was babysitting, then it was working in a children's clothing store, then it was a restaurant, and it was like at the student bookstore in college, and bartending. And so I just loved working. And I'm not sure I ever saw myself as like starting businesses. But that's certainly where I landed.
I love that you admitted about being the spender. The audience knows it's very consistent where I give shouts out to Dave Ramsey, and I probably listen to that show almost every single day. And they don't say spender, they call it the free spirit. So I love that. It's a free spirit. I know in terms of, you mentioned being a hard worker, and there's this very interesting I guess, economical shift that's happening and a social shift where even, people are saying, yes, I want to build a business, but I only want to work 3 or 4 days a week, or I want to build a business and I only want to work 2 or 3 hours a day. Having built a business, especially in what some would consider a very tough industry for women to really break ground in, how much would you credit your work ethic to being able to help you overcome some of the challenges that you've had?
Yeah, I can't say that it was always the healthiest or the best for me personally, but certainly when I first started, I was a lot younger. I was a woman with a heavy Southern accent in Manhattan, and those were almost three handicaps um, for me. People didn't think I knew anything because I was young. A lot of people didn't think I knew anything because I was from the South. Um,
Yeah.
and then I was a woman, and um, I overcompensated by just dominating in everything I did, and working probably more hours than than a healthy person should.
Mhm.
Now I do believe that it's not the hours of work; it is the what you accomplish, right? So I
Mhm.
can come in on a day and work 10 hours and go home and feel like I got little done, right? Like I did not check
Mhm.
the boxes. I didn't get this. I didn't get that. And then there's some days I can go in for, a couple of hours, and I have made great strides. And I try to incorporate incorporate that into my leadership now. Like I don't need to know where you are if you're showing me results, right?
Mm.
I don't have you don't have to come into this office and be here for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, because I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in what we're getting done.
Yeah. That's huge. And that's the conversation that is going on so much around management and employees, is this conversation around fulfillment, and how do we feel fulfilled in our work is progress, right? When the project isn't moving forward or we're not seeing results, and that's what causes burnout. And we're just doing the same thing over and over, but we're not moving the needle. And so I love that you said that. And it's that, I guess that comes from maturity and wisdom, and that doesn't necessarily have an age on it. I just turned 50, and like yourself, that I compensated for years working, I'm going to say, ungodly hours, and 3 jobs, and but not doing it for a season with an end goal in mind, just because I felt like I always had to prove myself and my worth as a woman. So I totally get it. And so you, going back to New York, you're building your career not in journalism, in the beverage industry. I don't even know, can you tie those two together, like in some regard?
Yeah, originally I was going to move to New York, go to culinary school, and then tie it in by just, getting a show on the Food Network. That's not hard. Yeah, that was
Guy Fieri did it, anyone could do it, right?
super naive on my part. And so for me, part of incorporating my journalism career throughout the past 22 years was writing wine descriptions and like printing them on the wine list for people to read, and to like make wine super accessible by relating it to tangible things that people have smelled or tasted. So was always excited about that. And then when I moved back to Tarboro and opened our restaurant, I started a blog. And I intentionally called it inezsays.com because there were days that I wanted to write about being a young mother. There are days I wanted to write about wine. There are days that I just wanted to write about the elf on the shelf being a pain in my ass. Like, so.
Thank you for admitting that. Thank you for admitting that. Mhm.
But it was so well received by the people who came to the restaurant, and then gradually, like, people in eastern part of North Carolina. And it was such therapy for me just to have that outlet to write.
Mm.
But yeah, there was no, like, I did a few guest op-eds on wine and in publications and stuff like that. But really, it was just me for me until the book.
So this is such a random question, and I love that just creatively expressing yourself with no guardrails and saying, I'm writing about the elf on the shelf today. I'm writing about, being a mom. I'm writing about wine, which those things do tie together. I'm just going to do a sidebar story. So I'm in Whole Foods one day, and I have a dearth of children myself, but this particular time I had no children with me. And I'm going through Whole Foods, and I'm walking down at our local Whole Foods. The wine aisle also has, like, the sparkling beverages like LaCroix and the waters and stuff. Anyway, so I'm going down there, and there's this mom, and she has a toddler, Inez, in her cart, and her eyes are like bulging out of her head. And she looks at me, she's like, I didn't even drink until I became a mother. And I put my hand on her arm and I said, honey, it's okay. Like, she just needed to tell someone. I'm like,
Exactly.
as long as you're not day drinking, as long as you're not drinking to get drunk, it's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. Right. And so I love that you shared that story and that creative expression. And this is such a random sidebar. So as a wine drinker, I'm the kind of wine drinker that is very particular about my wine. And I read a description, and when it says notes of tobacco, I'm like, no, I do not drink it. So how are in the description, when it's notes of tobacco, how is that appealing to someone who would never smoke a cigarette? Like, I need to know, as someone who has written wine descriptions, because that's been a burning question for many years for me.
Yeah. So I have never smoked a cigarette. I am not a fan of cigarette smoke. However, from someone who's grown up in rural eastern North Carolina where tobacco fields were the norm, wet tobacco and harvested tobacco has a very distinct aroma that is not similar to cigarette smoke. Um, and often comes in left bank Bordeaux, sometimes aged Rioja, sometimes uh, Sangiovese. But it is, it definitely has the aroma of wet tobacco. Like, I can remember it from my childhood, but I can totally understand how it's super off-putting. But yeah.
And maybe that they need to shift that narrative, like, aroma of wet tobacco, fresh tobacco plants, just something, right? Like, anyway, and then there might be some more appeal for, I don't know, maybe I'm the only weird one. I have
They
no
shouldn't
idea.
lead with it. They should not lead with wet or tobacco.
No, no, I agree. I had a friend of mine on the show. I can't remember what episode it was now. His name is Jess Todfield, and Jess prepares entrepreneurs for when they're going to go on CNBC or Fox Business or whatever. So they're in the zone. And we spent almost the whole episode talking about wine. It was so funny. I'm like, we're supposed to be talking about something else. So I need to pull myself back from that. Uh, because you could probably answer so many of my burning questions about that. That's a whole other episode. Just
Okay.
maybe we'll pour some wine and we'll do the episode, because that would be fun. So let's going back to New York. You were there for 9/11, and that day evokes so many memories for people, emotions for people. And what was your 9/11 experience?
Yeah, so I was super fortunate that my sister had gotten married on the 8th of September, and I was home being the maid of honor in her wedding. And because my parents have been divorced since I was super young, whenever I came home and stayed with one, there was always the expectation that I stayed with the other. And so I was with my mom and my sister, and we had driven to the mountains just to get a couple of days away. My flight was due to fly back to New York on September 12th. And this was the day of the beeper, right? I had a beeper that I kept on me all the time. Probably had it at my sister's wedding ceremony, and or a pager.
I haven't heard beeper in a long time. That is aging us, girl. So for the youngsters out there that don't know so we used to carry these things that were the size of a very small iPhone or half the size of that on our belt. And it had a clip, and we clip it on the belt. And it just kind of meant that you were important enough that people needed to reach you. So I just wanted to have a sidebar explainer.
Sorry, Susan, my dog is going crazy. Okay. So I had that, and it was going off. But my mother had woken me up and she was crying. And so I thought something had happened to my grandmother, but she said, just come watch the TV. And so I sat on the floor in the living room of this condo we were staying in, so naive and so in shock that I just thought, this is going to be such a mess to clean up. Was not even thinking, not even fathoming what happened would happen, right? There was never any thought in my mind that either of those buildings would fall. In fact, when I'd gone to orientation years ago, somebody had asked a question what if a plane flies into this building? And they had said it was built so that it could withstand a plane flying into it. But they didn't anticipate the amount of gasoline on a flight in 2001, is what really happened. And so I was frantically trying to call my office, which was a busy signal, and also trying to call my boyfriend, who also worked at Windows at his apartment in Jersey City. And then watched the second plane hit. And then, ultimately watched the towers implode. And somebody asked me, did I cry that day? And I don't remember crying that day. I just remember going completely numb, and dying inside. I died a little that day. A lot of people died a little that day, It was a terrible day for our world. And certainly, I waited way too long to invest in therapy after. But when I think about grief and grieving, mostly it's because we lose a person, but we're always able to go back to the place where we can remember that person. And in this instance, we lost multiple people, in my case, 85. And then we lost the place where we really celebrated together. So it was a dual loss, and really painful.
And Inez, if you could go back and in the place you're at now and speak to Inez 1 week before, so it's September 4th, what would you say to her?
Honestly, I probably would have said, go be there. And let the people who are working for me not be there.
It's to experience the being on the receiving end of such a heinous act. I can only relate to the extent that I'm a Boston Marathon bombing survivor.
Wow.
So that the there were days when I was angry. There were days when I was grieving. There were several years I couldn't even hear fireworks. I remember 2013, it was New Year's Eve, and Chris and the kids and I were skiing in northern Maine, and the fireworks went off, and I was cowering in the bed in the fetal position because I couldn't handle that sound. And so there are people listening all over the world right now who have not experienced that, and we hope you never will. And to lose your colleagues working, I grew up in hospitality, in our family restaurant, and people who work in a restaurant become a family. And Inez knows this. And so Inez lost her family that day. This was significant for you because sometimes it takes an extreme situation for us to go down a different path in our lives. And this was a catalyst for you that started you on the road to where you are now. So how did that journey begin?
Yeah, I was diehard New York, never going to leave. This is my place. Loved Windows, loved it. I mean, for a corporate culture, it was so family oriented. I mean, we had, I think it was over 50 countries represented in terms of our team. It was not unusual for a ton of us to go to um, uh, what's the type of Chinese? We went to this like place in Queens that we all ate together where people were playing mahjong, and I think it was bring your own. Like it was just really very special. You could go in the stairwell and at a certain time of day, and people were praying. It was very was a family, and it was um, like the woman who ran the uniforms, she altered my bridesmaid's dress. Like, right. Like it just was very family. And I needed that family back so badly, and took another corporate job way too soon after. And it was maybe a family, but like a super dysfunctional family. There was a lot of like, nobody was happy with their job. And that was what was so special about Windows. You couldn't really not be happy because everybody that was coming in was so excited to be there, and it was definitely like a celebrated spot. But yeah, took a job where it was so clearly the opposite of Windows, which was definitely where I said, Stephen, I can't do this anymore. Like I gotta get out of here. And my family, of course, was begging me to come home. They'd been begging since 9/11. And so Stephen said, your parents will let us come and take a break. Not many people have that opportunity. And so we moved home. We moved in with my dad and my stepmother, and we're preparing to go work the harvest in France in fall of '02. And right before we went, this woman called my home phone and said, I heard you and your husband owned Windows on the World. That's how, small town worked. Like,
Yes.
we didn't own it. But thank you. I'm sure that's what's going on all over Tarbury right now. I said, we don't have any money, and we're really not interested. We're going to move to France. We're going to come back, and we're going to move back to New York. But my dad heard the conversation and went down there, looked at the restaurant, came back and said to my fiance, if you build it, they will come. And Stephen said, this place is a culinary wasteland and it will not work. But I love you, and I'll give you an 18-month commitment. And Susan, this October, we turned 20 years old. which, I am proud of, because I will say the statistics are, 90% of all freestanding restaurants fail within the first year and 95% fail within the first 2 years. And I understand that, because it has been the hardest work we've ever done. You think about chefs in big cities where they really just get to be the creatives and somebody else handles payroll, finance, sales tax. Some people even have orders, ordering department or purchasing. We have done it all.
Mm-hmm.
And you lose a lot of the fun in that, right? Especially when you're looking at the finances in restaurants, because it's really hard to make money
a little
on
thing
food.
called COVID happened to the restaurant industry. Yeah. And Inez, so this restaurant, happy 20th, by the way. Like, I am so proud of you, in awe of you. This is a random question, but I was speaking at you probably don't even know this about me. So I was speaking at the National Restaurant Association big conference in Chicago this year.
Wow.
And one of the things I said, I was speaking on AI implications for restaurants, but one of the things I said, having grown up in the restaurant industry, is, that your greatest asset is your people, your greatest liability is your people, but you want to treat the people well who are there. After what you experienced with Windows, I have every belief that some of the people that work for you are your new family. So you got that. You did. How did the woman you became because of 9/11 help you navigate COVID as a restaurant owner in the hospitality industry?
Yeah. So just quick side note. In 2016, I left the restaurant to run and operate our brewery.
Mhm.
So Stephen has been doing that for the past 6 years, and I've been full-time brewery, which I might also add, like, running a restaurant, hard. It's really hard with your spouse. And so Stephen and I made the decision that our marriage was more important than working together.
Smart.
And we were creating this other business. So, but yeah, I actually dedicated a chapter in the book to March 2020, because when the country shut down, and it certainly felt like the world was shutting down also, there was an eerie similarity to after 9/11. Um, the thing about Windows people is, because everybody was from all over the place, even the people who survived, I didn't get to see them again necessarily. I mean, there were a few, but, like, there are a lot of people who are still living that I just never got to see again, because they moved back to the country they were from, the state where they were from, or, New York's big.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and less so in Tarboro, but more so in bigger cities. A lot of people who worked in restaurants when COVID hit were like, this is a sign. Like, I need to go back to do back where I'm from, or back to do what I want to do. And it just, the feeling, I don't know, it's just an eerie feeling of a loss of control.
Mm.
Just no one's in control here. Like, after 9/11, I mean, everybody's like, when you mentioned the story about fireworks, if I was outside and a plane was flying overhead, I was crouching under a bench, a bush, anything, because I was so scared of this plane. I mean, I've seen planes my whole life, and all of a sudden I just had this panic fear of a plane hitting something. I don't think that will ever go away, unfortunately. But yeah, the COVID thing felt like such a loss of control. Like, what are we going to do for our people? These are people who have been with us We have people who've been with us for 20 years,
Wow.
which is also unheard of in the restaurant industry. Um, but it was the interesting thing for me is I didn't feel like everything was gone, right? Like, because I'd seen really what happens when everything is gone.
That's huge. And I'm thinking about, this whole concept of trauma to triumph, right? And that going through something traumatic, it's not something you wish on anyone, but when you've had an intense experience, right? Like the ability that when you're going through something else to say, okay, I know how I'm going to react. And as a leader, an owner, an entrepreneur, if you can anticipate how you're going to handle it because you have a sense of what's coming, knowing how you, Inez, show up when there's a lack of control, that gives your team members certainty, which is huge. And I want to ask you, this is like, again, a COVID thing. So, how did the brewery do? Because alcohol consumption went up during COVID. So you've got, the restaurant, but then I'm sure, you've also got, people who either, aren't going to come to work, are going to come to work, but, and new restrictions. So how did the brewery do with COVID?
So the brewery took such a bigger hit than the restaurant and the wine store because, yes, alcohol consumption went up, but it was mostly in the form of wine and spirits. I think people were very cognizant of beer being uh, higher calories or, more fattening, if you will. And so going into COVID, that was the year 4 of TBC, Trevor Brewing Company. And I had geared up for it to be the year that we were going to start making money. And we went into COVID with more draft beer than we'd ever had. Draft beer sales died. People couldn't come into the tap room and drink a pint. And bottle shops were not an essential business. The grocery stores that served a beer while you were shopping were no longer doing that. And so um, I went head down into PPP firstly to save our people who were working there. We developed this Pants Drunk series of beers where we got a label design like I think it's the Dutch term for people who just sit around in their underwear and watch TV and drink, and started canning from keg, which you can't sell wholesale 'cause it's not the safest way to can beer. But we sold in like outdoor beer sales where with contactless pickup, right? We had it ready to go. They ordered it online. Our team really was so grateful to still have their jobs that everybody came together. I laid myself off um, for the first month until I could get the PPP going. But yeah, the brewery it took the biggest hit. The restaurant actually did better during COVID with no table service and takeout only. Um, and then the wine sales were just at an all-time high. But yeah, the brewery is tough, but I mean, we did it. We're going into year 7, and it was a tough ride, but I think we made we ran lean and green, and we made sure that our people felt appreciated, and with that came even more investment.
That I love the story because the what I'm hearing is that you're this kind of woman where you'll always find a way. And this pants drunk, that's a great story. So my husband's family is Dutch. So I've got to hear about this term. But this I'm going to adapt to my terrain. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to protect my people, and even laying yourself out. The PPP was something that so many people got online, they started applying for, and I love that you're able to say, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a business owner, I'm a woman who periodically would also like to shower and, get a workout in and, maybe get my hair done and all that stuff that we do. But to able to say, okay, I'm going to put everything on the shelf for a moment, and I'm going to focus on protecting this family, these people. And there's been a lot of controversy in HR with people calling their staff a family. And I'm adamant that some people do become like family, as you said, with Windows. I want to ask you just a couple of rapid fire questions. So we started this conversation, and for everyone who drinks wine out there, you better all give us a really great review, because I'm curious about this. You said you're spending a lot of time dissecting wine drinkers versus beer drinkers. I looked and I wrote this down. And so what have you found out about this?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to me. My background is wine, and the wine drinkers so loyal. I used to get a lot of props for being able to sell a different wine to a table, because they're never going to go for anything except this. And I would have such a good time trying to turn them on to something that of course they liked. It was just getting them out of their box, right? I'm not going to introduce dry Riesling to an oaky Chardonnay drinker. Know your audience, right? But I will introduce an oaky Chardonnay from Australia to a Napa oaky Chardonnay drinker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they're just very loyal to the brand, and even more so loyal to the grape or the country.
Mm-hmm.
Craft beer drinkers are just an anomaly, right? Hey, this is the best beer I've ever tasted. Check. I don't ever need to drink it again, right? I've tasted it. I need to go and find the next thing. And that's tough for somebody who spends all of her days selling beer to bottle shops, restaurants, stores, and it's tough, and yet it's fun, because we need to be creating new beers. We have our flagships, which are the ones that people are their go-to. But then we have our seasonals and our one-offs that are equally important, because there is no such thing as a permanent tap in 2022, right? Everybody wants a different beer. I shouldn't say that. I haven't found somebody to give me a permanent tap. But yeah, just trying to figure out what that is in the mind of a wine drinker versus the mind of a craft beer drinker.
It's so interesting too, because I don't drink craft beer, as I said before the show, and I'm a loyal California Pinot Noir. Could be Oregon, could be Washington. It's up from that part of the country, and no, don't suggest that I'm going to like a Sangiovese or something else, because or a Malbec, especially. Talk about tobacco. That isn't even hints of wet tobacco leaves. That y'all is like someone smoked a cigarette over the while they were stomping the grapes. But I will go buy craft beers for my husband, and I will buy them based on the name, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? So if I saw one that said Pants Drunk, I'm totally buying that and taking that home to him. And there's a company that's originally a Canadian company called Tim Hortons. And so every year, Inez, they have this time called Roll Up the Rim to Win. And then they have a snazzy commercial. It's like, roll up the rim to win. And so people buy more coffee during this time, because they roll up the rim and they win little things. Like they could win a free coffee, or they could win $500, or they, whatever. So I bet if you did flip the top to win, or whatever the case is, that could keep a tap on for 2022 and 2023.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
So there you go, girlfriend. It's like, it's all good. Inez and I didn't, there's another part of the conversation, and we'll have to do a second show because we were talking before the show too about women investing in women. And as an investor myself, I do look at women-led businesses, and I always recommend to people, disclaim this, if you're going to get started with investing, go on somewhere like a We Funder where you're investing small amounts of money. Don't ever, pull out money out of your retirement and things like that if you don't know how to gauge a good startup. But just very quickly, as we wrap up the show, like, what do you want to say about where we're at right now with women investing in women?
Yeah, most recently I had a woman come in and invest in the brewery, and she's actually like you, Susan. She's a software developer, tech person, and um, she believes in our mission. And with that, she has been an invaluable thought partner, right? Like, and I do feel like women, they are able to give so much, not just monetary, but like support, right? And so as a woman, I was just talking to this young woman who's a biotech startup, and she said they're asking the guy the questions he
Yep.
doesn't even know. And I said, I'm so sorry, this is your experience, and also this is every woman's experience. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I have predominantly male investors in the brewery. I shouldn't say that. I've been doing a really good job at like changing that. But one of them, after the shareholder meeting, went up to someone and said, who was not involved in the brewery, what do you think? And fortunately, the guy's a friend of mine. He goes, well, you shouldn't be asking me. You should be asking Inez, right? And it's just, I know we've come a long way, but we really have a long way. And the only way I see us breaking this, whatever it is for more women to intentionally invest in women run companies.
Yeah.
And I think the return is going to be greater.
Well, this, and I'll do just a reference plug for my own blog. I did an article with all the stats, Inez, and I don't have a journalism degree, so forgive the writing, but I did the stats, and I'll get May to send you the link, that show that women-led companies actually outperform in profitability, earlier to revenue, all of these things. And so I'll make sure that you get that, because it give you fuel for the fodder. And I know, like, I've been at, speaking at events all year, and I'm the co-founder and co-CEO, so equity partner in an AI company. And people say to one of my friends who works for a huge tech company, and we're at all these events together, like, what's Susan's role there? And she's like, she's the CEO. You need to, like,
He
yeah.
runs the show.
Yeah. like a co-CEO by, like, which is working out awesome for us. So I have my work husband, my real husband. But it's, I, to your point, when less than 2.5% of women-led pitches to VCs are getting funded, one of the things I'm excited about is these women-led companies, as they're growing and then they're exiting, is that we get to take some of that money we're exiting with and invest in women-led companies,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
awesome. Inez, okay, we are doing another show where we're going to have some wine. I will not be, it would be really funny if I drank craft beer, but I won't drink it, so it won't be as fun. But we're going to do another show where we drink wine and talk about wine, which has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but a lot of my entrepreneur friends do drink wine. So that's how I'm going to tie it in. But anyway, I just want to thank you so much for being here. You're absolutely amazing. And I just want to acknowledge your heart and your tenacity. So thank you, Inez, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. This was great.
Well, thank you. So for everyone, if the show's been helpful, share on social, tag us on social, go to Inez I will pronounce this correctly. I'm going to spell it, ribustello.com. So it's RIBUSTELLO.com, and follow Inez on social. Check out what she's doing. Go to the show notes. We'll put the link to the brewery. You all need to go there, and you all need to test the craft beers, and especially the Pants Drunk one, because I think that's awesome. And go and you can find her book, Life After Windows. And I highly recommend that you do read it, especially if you are navigating trauma right now in your life, if you're going through some entrepreneurial hardship, because you definitely want to learn from someone who has walked that path before. So Inez, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So with that, this has been another episode of Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. I hope that you go rock your day. God bless. And I will see you in the next episode.